Hi everyone, I'm Jane Trotter and this is Accelerando Piano. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to read notes fast. I can't stress enough the importance of being able to read notes quickly, efficiently and accurately. It means you can learn your pieces faster, explore and enjoy more repertoire, sight read confidently, and generally improve your overall musicianship skills. Sound good? Let's get down to business. It may surprise you, but you don't need to know the letter name of every single note before you play it. If you're doing this as you're playing, you're note naming rather than note reading. It's a subtle distinction. Note naming tends to analyse notes on an individual, discrete basis, whereas note reading focuses more on the direction and distance between notes. In other words, you're analysing the patterning and relationship of successive notes as they occur in the music. For example, do the notes move by step or skip, or is the interval, the distance between two notes, larger? Are the notes getting higher or lower? Particularly in the initial stages of learning, you'll be able to read notes much faster than you'll be able to name them. Let me introduce two basic concepts which you need to understand first to help you read the notes quickly. Our notes are written on a group of 5 lines called the staff or stave. We have notes which fit in between the lines called space notes, and we have line notes which are written on the line. In other words, they have the stave line running through the middle of them. The next concept is to do with pitch, or how high or low a note sounds. Imagine the stave is like a ladder. When you begin to climb the ladder, you start off low to the ground. And as you climb up the rungs, you get higher and higher. It's the same for the stave. When a note is written near the bottom of the stave, it sounds lower. And when it's written near the top of the stave, it sounds higher. Now, if you'd like to revise over the material I'll be covering today, all of the slides in this tutorial can be downloaded from the resources page on my Accelerando Piano website. Let's apply this to our note reading. Remember, when you're reading notes, you want to be thinking about direction and distance. So, when you look at successive notes on the score, do they move in an upwards or downwards direction? And how close or far apart are the notes situated on the stave? Imagining the stave is like a ladder, do the notes appear close together on the rungs, or is there a bigger gap between them? I'm going to begin with a step. This is the easiest distance to recognise between two notes. When the notes are a step apart, they're literally next door. They can't get any closer on the stave. So if the first note is on a line, the next note would be in an adjacent space. If the first note is in a space, the next note would be on an adjacent line. You can see in this example, the red space note A is higher than the purple line note G. So the red note has moved up a step. By the way, the colours don't mean anything. It's just an alternative way for me to differentiate and describe the notes. I don't want you to have to rely on knowing the letter names in order to understand these examples. Let's look at where these notes are found on the keyboard. You can see that they're right next door as well. If I play them, they sound very close. This next example is a step down. The blue space note, F, is higher than the pink line note, E. If I play them on the keyboard, you can see that these are also next door and that the second note sounds lower. Here's an example where the notes don't change. Their position on the stave stays the same. So you'd play the same key on the keyboard. The next easiest distance to recognise between two notes is a skip. This is where we leave out a note in between two notes. The most simple way to identify if the notes move by skip is that there'll be either two line notes next door, as in this example, or two space notes. You can see on the stave that the space note in between these two line notes, E and G, has been left out, and that the purple G is higher, so we've gone up a skip. If we apply this to the keyboard, we also leave out a note. Or to put it another way, we skip over a key. In this next example, we have space notes, A and F, where the blue F moves down by skip. You can see that the line note has been left out. Checking it out on the keyboard, we have skipped over a key. So far, we've talked about steps and skips. But what happens if the notes are further apart? How do we describe them and work them out? This is where the term interval comes in. An interval describes the distance between two notes. You can see on the chart that we count the bottom note as number 1 and then count up from there. So D to E is a second, D to F, third, D to G, fourth, we keep going up, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth. Now I've noted that a step is another way of describing the interval of a second, and a skip is a third. The further apart the notes are on the stave, the harder it can be to immediately work out the distance and then translate that into what keys you need to be playing on the keyboard. However, there are some neat shortcuts which I'll show you. When your interval consists of all space notes, like the purple interval, or all line notes, like the red example, you know your interval distance is going to be an odd number. Just to make it easier to see, I've written the notes on top of each other, like a chord. But this rule also applies if the notes were written one after each other. See, in the purple interval, D and A, the space note in between the purple notes is left out. And I've indicated this note in light grey. We know skips, or thirds, occur when we have two space notes or two line notes next door. So, when we work out our purple interval, the easiest thing to do is count up the spaces in odd numbers from the lowest note to the highest. 1, 3, 5. The interval is a fifth. Let's check out the red interval, E and D, and this uses line notes. Start at the bottom note, count up the subsequent lines in odd numbers until you reach the top. 1, 3, 5, 7. Our red interval is a seventh. So that's a neat shortcut for working out odd numbered intervals. When your interval consists of a mixture of line and space notes, you know it's going to be an even number. Let's look at the blue interval, D to G. Its lower note is a space and the higher is a line. As you can see with the grey notes, 2 are missing in between, making the overall interval a fourth. A quick way of analysing this would be to observe that the top blue note is sitting immediately above where a skip interval would be. That's the grey 3. You know a skip is a third, so this must be a fourth. We can do the same quick equation on the pink interval. Recognise your skips up from the bottom note. 1, 3, 5. And the top pink note is sitting immediately above, giving us the full interval distance of a sixth. So let's put our analysis into practice. I'll begin with an easier example and then move on to a harder one. Here's the easy tune. It only uses steps, skips, and repeated notes. I'll play it through first without any annotations on the score. And then the second time through, I'll have some very colourful indications showing whether it's a step or a skip or the same note, whether it's going up or down. Here's the tune. Okay, and now with all the annotations underneath, here we go. Up a skip. Down by step for those 3 notes. Up a step, same note. Up a step. Down a skip. Up a skip. Up a skip. Same note. Down a skip. Up a step. Down a skip. Down a step. Okay, now the more complicated melody. This includes steps and skips and wider intervals. So I'll play it without the annotations first, so you can just get a feel for what it's doing, and then we'll put the version up with all the annotations there. So here's our tune. And now with our colourful annotations, let's take a look. The red pattern, up by step. Pink pattern, down by step. Skip pattern. Now here's the interval of a 4th, right up to that C on top. Skips going down. Interval of a 6th going up. Skips going down. Little alternation of a step. There's another wider interval. We're going up a 5th and then a step up to finish. There you go. Some tips for how to read your notes quickly. Remember, it's all about direction and distance. How far apart are your notes and do they move up or down by step? Steps and skips are the easiest to decipher. And think about your interval distance when the notes are further apart. Obviously, you need to identify your starting note. And if you'd like some extra help with learning how to do this, I have some videos which cover how to work out the letter names of the notes and how to find them on the keyboard. Once you've found your starting note, however, you don't need to name every note before you play it. This can really impede your fluency in performance. If you're doing this, you're relying on note naming rather than note reading. Being fluent at note reading has so many benefits, so I'd really encourage you to become familiar with some of the tips and tricks I've shown you today and apply them in your pieces.